In the world of springers, there's a ton of different front end styles out there. So we decided with this build we were going to do something a little bit more traditional with the vintage style that Harley used to run back in the 30s, and that being a 1930 style DAH hill climb front end. I'm Sean Jackson, and this is my custom build. The biggest thing that's different about this springer, whereas your normal traditional springers, is the way that your rockers are set up here. And that is a trailing link style rocker. So your axle is actually further behind your pivot point, whereas in a modern springer, your axle is in the front here, you know, up in the front of your front forks. You have two straight forks coming down and your axle's out front. So what we did is we took our rear link, which is your main support rod, that's your main bar, and we bent them and have them coming out further than your actual springer fork. And it actually was a little bit tricky to kind of get it all together and get it together correctly, because we don't really have jigs or anything for this. This is the first one we have ever done. And my buddy Kevin and I, Kevin was modeling it and we were coming up with the idea. There was a lot of different things. We were bouncing ideas back and forth, because all we really had to go off of was the pictures and stuff from the 1930s, and when Harley used to actually run this on their hill climb bikes. And in the 1930s, Harley had factory race bikes, and they used to support things like board track racing. And once the board track racing started phasing out, they actually went into hill climbs, because board track racing was a little difficult. Started getting people more and more killed. They started calling them murder drums. So Harley started, they didn't want to be associated with all the death and negativity of the sport. So everything started transferring into hill climbs and more dirt, flat track race, that kind of thing. So Harley had a lot of their factory racers from the board track stuff come over into the hill climb events. And with that, 1927, 1928, that era, they started dedicating bikes directly for hill climb events, and they had factory race teams just like they did in the prior years for the board track racing stuff. So with that being said, the DAH, that was the bike that Harley had, and that was the front end. That's where we got the inspiration for this style front end. We just went off pictures and everything like that. But this particular front end is all 304 stainless. All the trees, everything here is machined out of 304 stainless. The springs are actually off of a normal springer with your internal plungers and everything. Everything else is hand fabricated. These lowers here, these are actually CNC'd. And the rocker plates is something that my company, Competition Distributing, we supply these. These are VLH style rockers, which those fit VLs, VLHs, 30 through 36 Harley Davidsons. But so we adapted these to make those rockers work. And inside of these rockers are oil impregnated steel bushings. And what we did is we actually machined them down, took some width off them, and we pressed them into the machine cups down here. And the tubing we bent, they all slide down in, so it's all like a joint socket setup. So it makes it a little easier to put together without jigs. So all we had to do is fixture it up on a table, and take all of our dimensions, all of our measurements, everything, get it welded up. But everything's TIG welded, of course. Again, it's all stainless. The top tree is actually removable with pinch clamps, like a modern day front end. Kevin designed that into the style of the style of Springer. But and then we have the riser holes here, and those are actually, I have two studs coming up through that we welded, and then you have a 2.5 inch rise. And what we wanted is we wanted the springs to be higher than your overall handlebars, because that gives it that kind of old vintage look like the hill climbers did. And again, with the bars, I'm a huge fan of hill climb bikes, as you can tell, but the bars they used to run were like a buckhorn style bar, they call them. So I really wanted to incorporate that into this whole front end, the whole look, kind of carry it through the bike, because I wanted the bike to be a mixture of old and new and kind of blend it together the best we could. So I made the bars, and this is actually not stainless. This is actually regular DOM steel tubing, and had it nickel plated, but I made them pretty much directly off the buckhorn style bars that they had on the hill climb bikes. And I put our weld-on spirals on the bottoms here, and these are a short racer spiral, so they're extremely short compared to like a traditional early style grip. And I made these brass covers for them, which are my grips. They're solid brass that I machined out and put them over the racer spiral. So you have an internal throttle here, you know, nice clean lines. You can't really see anything. You come down here and your throttle cable comes out of the bar. Ran everything internally and then drilled the bars. And on the other side, where your advanced retard would be on a normal vintage bike, I put cable in there, but it's going to operate my foot brake for a hill hold brake, because this bike particularly is going to have a foot clutch. When you pull up to a hill, you don't really want to, you can't take your left foot per se off the clutch pedal. You'll go out, you know, take off, go out of gear. So that is what we call a hill hold. So you'll apply your brake with your left hand and not have to remove your left foot from your clutch pedal. So, but yeah, so other than that, we did everything here in house. We made everything. These are your shoulder bolts down here with shims that go through the rockers, so everything pivots nice. Made the axle here in house. All custom chrome ollie machined, and then the bearing spacers. So obviously every bike needs a steering neck to hold the front end of the bike on. So obviously with this bike being a non-traditional plate frame style, where everything bolts together, I couldn't run a normal steering neck like you would weld on a normal bike. So this neck here is pretty special. I machined the whole thing out of you know, solid chunks of stainless, and it's pretty neat because it actually bolts into the frame like the rest of the frame does, right? So as you can see through the whole bike, the whole frame's bolted together. It all has spacers and everything. So machine this up, and these are, you know, larger diameter bolts, but the neck actually has bolts from both directions that come in, and then that part is welded to the steering neck itself. And then I just have standard steering cups with your fork stops actually pressed into the neck that I machined down. And when you bolt this in, I actually lock wired every single piece of hardware on here. So like any major component of hardware has a lock wire on, just for extra backup. Obviously has lock washers, aviation lock wire, wire tie, however you ever want to call it. And then also everything is Loctited as well. But yeah, it's a pretty cool little feature to add to the complexity of the whole thing. That was the first part of the series of this bike that I'm building right now for the Built Wells People's Champ out in California. We're gonna go through in detail with every major function feature of the bike as we go along here, so stay tuned. We'll have another series coming up.